Hi, good morning and welcome, and thank you for joining us for our first Axminster Woodturning live stream for Dorch and Danola in Denmark. My name is Jim Preston. I'm account manager for Dorch and Danola, and I've been working closely with them to organise this. Just to let you know, Carsten from Dorch and Danola is available in the chat room for any questions that you may have in Danish. We'll be working behind the scenes to translate them and get them to Colin. Any questions in English, we will try and answer at convenient points throughout when Colin stops. Everything that Colin uses today is available from Dorch and Danola, so please contact them if you would like more details on price, availability, or to place an order. We are very proud and thankful to have Dorch and Danola as such a great partner in Denmark. We would love to come and visit you all in person, and hopefully we'll be able to next year. For now, without this possibility, this is our way of saying thank you to them and thank you to you for your continued support of Axminster Woodturning through Dorch and Danola. So, without further ado, I will leave you in the very talented and capable hands of Colin Way and hope that you enjoy the show.
Hi, well, good morning, everybody. As Jim just said, my name is Colin Way, and I'm really excited to be demonstrating for you this morning. This is the first time that I have a chance to demonstrate some wood turning for you. Hopefully it won't be the last. We'll get a chance to do many of these in the future. So today I wanted to do some, or start doing some of the Christmas-inspired decorations for you. And we're going to start with this little figure here. This is a Christmas smoker. So you may be familiar with Christmas smokers as German tradition. And I've been lucky enough to travel in Eastern Germany with Jim a couple of times. And these are little incense burners in the style of, we're going to call them our Danish Viking. So there we are. There's the incense holder, or the cone holder there. You put a little incense cone in there. And then when you put the lid back on, the incense starts coming out of his mouth. Now, the tradition behind German smokers is that in the Christmas period or Advent, you put up German nutcrackers. Once the Advent has gone, you then put up your German smokers. German nutcrackers are in the form of highly sort of powered figures, so soldiers, kings and queens. But the smoker is the working man, hence Vikings, wood turners, carpenters, all that sort of thing. So that's why I like these figures ever so much. They're a nice little project. They're, I would say, a weekend project because there's quite a few parts in them. So what we're going to do today is go through all the parts from the ground up. It's quite important. We start from the bottom, we work our way up. So hopefully I'm going to answer all the questions for you as we go. But if not, like we were just saying, just ask us the questions. We've got Craig behind the scenes. We got Jim behind the scenes. And they're going to ask me all the questions for you. So let's make a start. There's quite a few jaws. There's quite a few centers. I'm just going to put this one away a minute, and there's quite a few chucks to use. So I'll explain them as we go. If I could just hand that to one side. Okay. So at the moment, what we have. And I've got all of my selection of timbers to one side here. Like I say, we're going to start with the base up. So what we're going to start with here, I've got some elm. Okay, this is Scottish elm. And what I want to do is make one of these. I want to make the base. So you can see that we've got a recess on the bottom. Okay, a nice flat top. We are going to drill a couple of holes. Now, most of the pieces I pre-drilled for you, so we won't need to do any messing around with drilling, only because most of the holes I drill get done on a pillar drill, so a stand-up drill. These I'm going to have to do freehand, which I don't normally like doing, purely because there's no depth control when you're freehand drilling. So that's why I've pre-drilled a lot of these pieces. So we're going to start with the base. So I'll explain every piece as we go. The lathe I'm using here, this is the 406, so the AT406. It's a nice all-rounder. It will do everything that I want it to. And we're going to be playing around with a couple of different chucks, the SK114 and the SK100, with a multitude of different jaws. It doesn't really matter, though. If you don't have loads of different jaws, that's fine. You make this figure to suit the kit that you have. Certainly, I've just done this to make it easier for me. I've also instead of taking jaws off of the chucks and refitting different jaws, I've just got chucks set up with the right jaws in, so I can just change the chuck rather than jaws. Absolutely no bother just changing jaws each time. So just remember that. I've got them all at hand. So bases first. So we're going to move. This is what we're going to use later on. This is a sanding table. So we'll come back to this one in a moment. This is a nice bit of kit that I use in conjunction with a sanding disc on here. And that's quite important to what we're going to do because we need to do a fair bit of sanding on this piece. Also, in terms of decorating, I'm going to show you a little bit of airbrushing, but I'm not going to do too much. The decorating is the footnote or the project to the side of the actual turning, because that will take as much time as turning the piece itself. And I would say do that afterwards, do that in your own leisure, and get rid of all the dust to do that. But we will be having a little look at some of that later on. So that can go to one side just for the moment. The first jaws I'm going to use are these. It's just a large set of dovetail jaws. And we're on the SK114 chuck. So it's a nice set of jaws because I'm just going to place that in the center just to do the underside. So I think we'll get started straight away. Don't forget, guys, if you've got any questions, just ask them. I don't mind being asked a question at any time. We'll go over it. And there is no such thing as a silly question. Okay. So we are also going to have dust extraction running. Now, the mics we're using should cut out some of that noise. So you shouldn't be bothered too much. But the dust extraction is going to be from source, taking as much of that dust that I'm making. I'm going to try not to do too much sanding, but some we have to do. So there we are. That's securely held in there now. We're going to go straight into just cleaning that surface up. And it's going to be a combination between skew chisel and bowl gouge in this case. So lathe speed to 0, turn the lathe on, go the right way. And we're going to go quite fast, little 1/4 inch bowl gouge to start with. We're just going to skim that surface. Take off some of the corners. We'll just have a quick check to make sure that we're down to solid round, and we are. Now we're going to go to a parting tool. What I want to do next is size for my next chuck, and we're going to use and again, it's another SK114. This time, it's what we refer to as OD112s. So these are O'Donnell jaws 112s, and I use these for a lot of small projects. Really like those, but we need to close the chuck up just a little bit, and then I'll take a measurement from it. There we are, about there. I'll use a set of dividers. All right, let's get that in sight for you. So all I'm doing here is measuring the outside diameter to center point. And then we can transfer that over. Then using my parting tool, don't go too deep. We want to keep it fairly shallow. Back with the bowl gouge again. We're going to work away from this outside edge. And then clean that finish up. And then skew chisel. Because the inside surface here needs to be dovetailed, the skew chisel is perfect for that. You get that nice dovetailed angle. There we are. So that's before. Now, I tend to batch turn these, so make them in batches. If you're going to make them in batches, you would do all of the bases to this state all in one go, and then turn them over, change the chuck out, do the next stage. It's just a little bit more time saving. But there we are, that's ready. I'll give that a little bit of a sand up, and then we're ready to turn that over and do the front of the base. So we'll have a dust extractor on. Just going to do a little bit of sanding. Like I say, I don't want to waste your time too much on sanding, but that'll do us just to take away some of those nibs. That'll be fine. So now we can change the chuck over. So those were the large dovetail jaws. We'll go to the O'Donnell set now. And like I said, if you don't have all these sets of jaws, make the figure suit your kit, your tools. And there, so the ODs can come in. Reverse our piece onto the dovetails. And then we're ready. First of all, I'm just going to tidy that outside edge. This is it's quite a soft piece of elm, quite a soft piece of timber. So I'm going to do what we call a skew cut. So that's where we drop the handle of the gouge down nice and low, and we use the bottom edge. And that's going to give us a nice shear cut. You probably see those nice little ribbon shavings. And this, I mean, this sort of thing, this sort of project here, this part of the project, I mean, you would do the same thing if you're making any plinth or anything, any stand for a trophy, that sort of thing. It's the same sort of style of turning. We've done that face now. I'm just going to tidy this front face up. And this is important that it's nice and flat. If you don't make this flat, if this is sort of curved in any way, your figure's going to be sort of leaning over, and it won't be sort of nice and upright. So it's quite important to get this flat. So I'm going to go in now with a skew, and a fairly large one. This is the signature skew, so German-inspired signature skew. And this is just going to help keep that surface nice and straight. There we are. There we are. I won't bother sanding. Normally now I'd sand, but I've just shown you sanding once. We're not going to bother doing that again. I can build this up. I can sand this after we've finished the stream and get it all nicely finished. But that's it. That's the first bit, the base. I will just put a couple of little drill holes in there just to show you how we get from that to the even holes. And basically I like to template as much as possible. So if you can keep a template, that means you can repeat the project that you're doing and get the same measurements every time. So with that there, in fact, what I'll do is I'll bring into play now that little sanding table that I found, or I find really useful. Let's explain about this piece of kit just for a little bit, because we're going to use this to sand in a minute. So this is the mounting plate. So the Axminster mounting plate, the actual tool post itself, and then a stop collar. Now I've set this to halfway. So when that's set into the tool rest, this is to the center height of the lathe. So when I'm sanding or using a sanding disc, I don't have to mess around getting center heights each time. So this is now converted my lathe into a bench sander, a disc sander. So much used bit of kit for me. I'm using it pretty much every day. So really useful. But I'll use it just in this instance to give me a platform. So what I want to do is create 2 holes in here. Now it's really important that they line up with the 2 holes that we've got in the midsection of the smoker. Otherwise, when the piece stands up, he's going to be leaning. So it's got to be the same. So just little templates. So what I've got here, there we are, that's perfect. It's just a little bit of card. You can use a bit of Foamex, you can use a bit of plastic, thin piece of timber maybe, but basically this has all the relevant holes. So you can just see here and here, these are the 2 distance holes that we need to drill to fix the legs and feet into in a moment. So I'm just going to get that in position. I'll put a couple of Brattle little awl points in. There we are. And they will eventually meet up with the same distance as this piece. This is going to stand up here. The legs are going to be in between this section once I've turned this round. Okay, so they match the distance between. So we can get rid of our template. We're just going to put a couple of small holes. Like I say, it's not my favored way of doing these holes. Normally I want to do these holes with a pillar drill, but I haven't got a pillar drill here at hand, so we're just going to put them in fairly shallow, 6 millimeters, because we're using 6 millimeter dowel. Okay, just being fairly cautious there. I don't want to go too deep. I don't want to drill into my base there. But then with that, we're going to use fluted beech dowel. So fluted beech dowel is something that I use a lot for joining, and that's going to go in there. We'll cut this off to length in a moment, and then that'll be able to fix the feet and eventually the legs into. Okay, so that's finished. So now let's move on up. We'll move on up. We've got to create some feet next. So we want to make a pair of those. Okay, just our little feet. And again, it's a very simple part of the project, but you see the holes go all the way through because we're going to join this through and into the base, then eventually up to the legs as well. So we need that dowel to travel all the way through those. So I prepped a couple of pieces of timber. We've got the holes through them already. Again, we're going to use a little template, just a little template to draw around, and then we can sand to that profile. So we're going to use our sanding disc. We're just going to change our chuck out again for another SK114 and the C jaws. This time with the C jaws, these are my sort of go-to set of jaws. With those, I can add my sanding disc. Okay, on the back of the sanding disc, we've got this part here. This is a faceplate ring that fits over the dovetails on the C jaws and just locks on, and then expand the jaws into that recess. We're using Velcro, okay, and I tend to get this in strips, apply it to a piece of plywood, and then discs on top. So really, really quick and easy way of working. We've already got our center height, or the height that I want for the disc. There we are. Lathe speed to 0, turn the lathe on. Obviously, we're going to have dust extraction going now because we're going to create a huge amount of dust on this. And we're just going to sand them to shape. So that's the basic shape. We are going to do something else with them in a minute. I just want to create the front of the foot. We'll just do our other one. There we are. So there's our 2 feet. The next thing we need to do is just chamfer the front. There we are. So there are our 2 feet. Ever so simple. You're not trying to recreate the an exact replica of a foot. That's not what we're doing here. This is literally just the outer impression of a foot, and then just shape down for the toes as well. So good, really, really simple. Now, of course, this is going to need a little bit of hand sanding just to take off what I would call the fluffy bits, just to tidy that up. But once you've done that, then they're ready to fit. We're going to fit it all together now. As we make each piece, we'll make sure it all goes together. So I'm going to cut a couple of bits of dowel. Just take off those little fluffy areas. Like I say, you spent some time on this. This is a nice little project. It's not hard work in any way. So take a little bit of time. And I think we have our first question. So yes, Craig's on questions as well as Jim. So yes, Craig, what's the first question?
Yeah, we've got a quick question from Frederick. What kind of wood did you use to make the feet?
Good, but I haven't told you what timbers we're using. We're using a mixture, really. So this is sycamore, and we're using a lot of lime, and we use a lot of maple. So there's a good combination of timbers. If you notice, most of them are pale apart from the base. And there's a really good reason for that, is because when I finish the piece, I want to colour it. And so the paler the timber, the less interference it has with the colour. So sycamore for the feet. I'm using sycamore for the legs. We're then going to a bit of sycamore or lime for the body, and then it's a piece of maple for the head. Now, I'm using maple for the head because, again, we're keeping that as timber. I'm not painting that at all, apart from maybe a little bit of red just for blushing cheeks, that sort of thing. But it's dense, and I'm going to have to drill a hole through the head so the smoke can come out. So it's quite important. I want a crisp hole to it, so I want something a little bit denser than the sycamore. Same family, but just the maple is just a little bit harder. And then if we're making things like shields and stuff like that, I'll go to oak. So something that's got a strong grain pattern. But yeah, the sycamore, that was a long answer to your question, Frederick, but it's sycamore for the feet. Okay, so let's cut some dowel. So I'm going to use a little pull saw and just have some help from my V block here. I'm guessing the length at the moment, but you want to measure it properly. So just a little pull saw, just easier for cutting these smaller areas. We'll do a couple of these. And don't worry, I'm not going to do a piece of dowel for everything we make today. But yeah, get yourself a little tray of dowel. I would advise doing it with a pull saw as opposed to cutting your dowel on a bandsaw. It gets a little bit too close to the blade for my liking, and certainly not on a table saw. But get yourself a little pull saw, or even a scroll saw, something like that. But hand saw is a little bit safer, or much safer, and easier to control as well. So pop that one away. So we're going to build this first section. So there's our base. We'll put the dowel through. And then you can go into your base. I'm not going to go in too far because we want the leg to be gripped as well. And I would say with smokers, definitely glue these together. Just a regular PVA glue would be fine. And I would say on smokers, because if you're making Christmas pyramids or nutcrackers even, you might want to loose fit them so that you can dismantle them after Christmas. Smokers are nice and small. You can put them in a box for safekeeping for the next year sort of thing. So there we are. We've got a nice sturdy base. Now we can work up. Now we can speed things up a little bit. Okay, so we're going to work up from there. Now let's put that beside me. We're going to look to do some legs next. Now we're going to go back to between center turning now so we can get rid of our chuck. And we're now going to use a couple of single pointed centers. So when I say single pointed centers, excuse me, what I mean, to one side, what I mean is the drive center to be single pointed. So in this case, we've got a little light pull drive. So basically a friction drive. And in the tailstock, we've got a regular single pointed live center. Really useful because our feet, or sorry, our legs, these are the timber for our legs. So sycamore again, they're drilled both ends. Okay, again, we want to fix to the feet and we want to fix to the mid base. So that can go in there. That can go in there. And now we're actually turning around the hole. So the hole stays central. That is the important part. So right onto our light pull drive. 6mm holes to match the 6mm dowel we're using, don't forget. And I'm going to do both of these parts. We're going to use a mixture of a bowl gouge and a skew chisel. And we're going to go for the small 12mm skew, signature skew. Small tool rest, let's go for the 100mm tool rest. And high speed, really important. We're using friction now. High speed is really, really important because it gives little pressure on the lathe. So I'm going to be up over 2,000 RPM. There we go. So we're going to rough down first. Now your first one's okay. We can do whatever shape we want to. We can also trim to length. The second one, we have to match the exact dimensions that we're getting on the first one. So we got a little bit of freedom on this one. So we're rough down. Then we'll go to the skew, we'll clean up and shape. So I like to go a little bit tapered toward the foot. Then clean up either end. Of course, you would sand that now. I'm not going to bother. We'll sand that one later. Off the drive. And all we've got to do now is repeat that on leg number 2. So we'll grab our other bit of sycamore. I'm going to keep the first leg next to me so I can match sizes. Remember where these are stood. They're actually next to each other. So any slight change in size, length, diameter, you'll pick it up. Now, if you want to, absolutely use a set of calipers for this. I'm just judging it by eye. Generally, if you start off with the same dimension stock, so same dimensions bit of timber, You should be pretty close when you finish turning, if you're doing the same process on both of them. Just the tiniest little bit off this one now, and we're there. There we are. We have our 2 legs. Two legs all ready to be fitted. So we will put that on the base. We've got him started already. There we are. There we are. So we've got our figure starting to take shape. Okay, so next section, we're going to move on upwards. This is right out the Production Turners workbook. Next, we're going to use a set of jigs. Well, not a set of jigs. We're going to use a little drive dog, a little drive, bit of waste timber. I need to swap the center out though. So now I'm going to go to a ring center. So the ring center is this one here. So instead of having our single point, we've got that ring that's around that point. That's going to stop that point from burying into the timber. And we're going to use a pressure plate or a push plate. Push plate's going to go in the chuck. And we'll go again for the C jaws. And these are something that I use an awful lot of. Basically, that little push plate there has got a bit of router matting attached to the top. It goes in the C jaws. I've prepped up the next piece. Now, this is the platform that will eventually hold the little incense cone, but I need to turn it around, and the body's going to sit on top of this as well when it's round. So this is a piece of cedar. Again, you can use sycamore, you can use your matching timbers if you want to. I'm going to use a piece of cedar because it smells nice. And what I've got is a center point. You can just make it out. Center point there. Now we only need to have that on one side because I need it as a reference for this. But everything else is just going to be pushed against that plate to drive it. So if we bring that up, holes are pre-drilled because I wanted to do that in the pillar drill. Push against it. Because I've already thicknessed this, I've got this to the right thickness. I don't need to touch the sides. I'm just touching the edge, making that round. Nice and quick. Again, for the same reason, I don't want too many frayed fibers. And let's go with again a 1/4 inch bowl gouge in this case. Handle nice and low, and do that shear cut we done earlier on the base. Coming in from both sides so we don't get any breakout. Let's have a check, just see what we've got. There we are, we're ready to go. There's a little bit of a fray on that edge. But that's done. So you can see how quick and easy it will be to make several of those, just held between the 2 points. Really nice way of working. That's given us a nice center point there as well. So when you're aiming to glue on the incense cone holder later on, you've got a nice little center point to do that. Okay. So in a minute, or the next thing we're going to do is the body. So we're going to make sure that the hole we put in the body takes this size. So we've got that piece already. We can fit it, just like making a lid for a box almost. And also the depth of that that shoulder that we make, that needs to fully sink into it. So we've got that to hand now. But when everything is done, another piece of dowel is going to go through those holes into those, and you've got the bottom of your smoker all complete after that. Okay, right then, so the body. So the first substantial bit, I would say, and again, if you're doing a lot of these, you would do this stage on all the pieces before you move onward. So we're going to take our piece of sycamore. Okay, nice bit of sycamore. This is quite dense. Sycamore tends to vary. If you get it, if it's been felled too long and it's been out in all the weathers, what you tend to get is quite a lot of what we call punky timber, so soft, fracturous timber. This is nice. It's dense. There's got a lot of strength to it. This is the sample piece. Okay, that's what I want to achieve at this stage. So basically create the rough shape and then create a hold for my O'Donnell jaws again. We're going to go with those small jaws. Then I can hollow out the top of the piece. All right, so we want to get to that stage. So I'm going to roughly center this up. You could, in fact, let's do it. Let's go to our marking gauge. This is not a square piece of timber, so it's going to be slightly harder to find center than it would normally be on a square. But you can see there, look, my center point is right there. Same on both sides. We'll mark that up. We're going to use, just initially, I'm going to use a Pro drive. Again, chuck can come out. Pro drive can go in. I'll use the large Pro drive in this case. And if you don't know what a Pro drive is, the Pro drives have got a sprung center and they've got the serrated teeth around the outside. Okay. We'll keep the ring center in. I quite like that one for these sorts of things. It stops that point from sinking in too far. And it's going to be the first time I get to use the roughing gouge. It's a big enough section to use the roughing gouge. We'll go up on tool rest size a little bit. Check your corners, make sure nothing's touching. And it's going to turn the lathe speed down a little bit as well. So I'm turning this at around about 16 to 1800 revs. Little 3/4 inch roughing gouge. There we are. We'll stop there. Now we can start thinking about the shape. So I'm going to make the recess or the hold point to fit my O'Donnell jaws again. So this time I'm going to get the calipers out and we're going to use the calipers to set that depth. Or diameter rather, not depth. And we'll go straight to a beading and parting tool. So beading and parting tool. This is a 6mm beading and parting tool. Create the hole point first. All right, so we're over the right diameter. When you've done that, we'll need to make a dovetail. So we're using the skew to create a dovetail. And I'll show you this in a moment. Can't quite see it from the camera angle that you're at, but let me just stop the lathe and show you. So that's what we've created. We've got that dovetail now that's going to fit into our O'Donnell jaws, just so. Okay. But let's get as much of the shaping done that we can at this point before we go into the chuck. Like I say, I want to be able to get to that stage at the moment. Okay. So where we've got that nice shape already. So I'll go with bowl gouge for that, and let's go for a little 1/4 inch again, 6 mil. There we are, that'll do us with the bowl gouge. Now I'm going to raise the tool rest and go back to the skew. And the skew, because it gives a much cleaner finish. There we go. And we'll just tidy up the underside. Yeah, that's ready. So now again, if you're batch turning, if you want to do 3, 4, 5, 6 of these for Christmas presents, that sort of thing, then everything gets done to that stage before we dismount, put the chuck on, and start on the next stage. Let's just clear the tools just for the moment. Machine can go off. We're going to swap the centers over and get a chuck going. Again, we just need to remove our Pro Drive. O'Donnell jaws can go back on. And now we got good free access to turn the inside out. Now you can drill that out in advance if you want to. I'll just turn it out for speed today. But again, if you're doing batches, it might be wise just getting a drill and drilling it out. Because I'm going to bring the handle round, I'm going to remove this just for the moment. The tailstock needs to come away. Gives me loads of space to work then. And we'll go with our 6 mil gouge. Take out the worst. And this is like doing any box turning. Tackle it in the same way. I'm going to take out some of the bulk, and then I'm going to size to our little platform that we made earlier. So just doing a little depth cut with the bowl gouge. We're actually deep enough already. Okay, we're not fully there yet. We've taken quite a lot of the bulk out, but what I want to do now is size our disc. That's got to go inside there, you see. So we're going to size that to suit. Now at the moment, let me just take that away. I can see that we've got quite a lot to come. We're going to make a fairly thin skirt or top to the piece, but that gives me a little bit of a visual aid as to where to go. So I can go with let's go with a skew chisel bring out the wall thickness. And don't forget, you want that to sit in there nice and deep. Do our check. And again, you don't want this to sit in and really sort of bind up. You've got to think about lighting the incense cones, putting the top back on again. And if it's really stiff, you're going to move it around when you've got a lit incense cone inside, which you don't really want. So let's just have a look. Don't leave it in there. I've done this before and I've got it stuck inside and I haven't been able to remove it. We're quite close to diameter size, but I'm going to go with it in this case. So it can be loose, tiniest little bit more. You can see it's just fitting, but I want to be much slacker than that. So tiniest little cut. There we are. That's going to be it. I'm going to go maybe just a little bit more, and then that's our diameter. Done. There we go. That fits nicely. I'm not going to put it all the way in because I'll have nothing to grip to take it out again. So, but that's certainly in there. The depth is about right. I can see that from here. I don't know whether you can see, but that's all the way in. So we got that matching just right. Luckily, I didn't go too much smaller in diameter because we've only got a little bit of waste there. But it's important now that we create a little bit of landing. I don't know whether you can see that on the camera, but this section just here, leave enough of that for this to sit on. You don't want it sort of tilting around once you've got that inside. So I'm going to leave probably around about 3 to 4 millimeters of width there, which we'll do now. And we can finish hollowing as well. Get rid of the skew. So there, around about that amount is perfect. That'll sit neatly. So it's just all about taking that waste out now. We're going to go to a bigger bowl gouge in a minute. So now we're going in quite deep. What we're getting from this gouge, because it's quite small, we're getting a little bit of vibration. So we're going to go to a bigger gouge. You can, of course, go to your box scrapers, little round nose scrapers, those sorts of things. That works. Anything that you're happy with. Now we'll just stop. We'll just have a double check of thickness. You know, we're there. I don't want to go any smaller. We're there because you don't want to go micro thin. If you go really thin all the way up, we have to sand the flat on this to take the head. So it's quite important that we leave some substance there. So that's fine. We're probably about 6 mil at the top, which is perfect. So let's pretend we sanded up to that point. You've done all your batch, so all your 6 pieces, 10 pieces, as many as you want to do. Our next job, now that we've done that, we've got that be fitting nicely now. Okay, and then eventually when it's all put together, that will sit on top, all ready to take the inset. We've got to remove this though. That's got to come away. So we're going to go back to C-jaws. And carefully, because I haven't got much thickness of material left, I'm going to expand into that recess carefully, because like I said, there's not a lot of material there, but we're going to go inside. Perfect. Because there's not much material there, I'm going to use the tailstock again. Quite important in this case, but this is giving us access now. If you didn't use these, we could go straight into, let's say, for instance, using the outside diameter of our O'Donnell jaws as well. They'll fit inside, no problem. So you've got good options there. So tailstock. Make sure you've got your headstock and your tailstock aligned, and you do that by raising the feet on the base. And once you've done that, you can bring everything up together. I will remove the tailstock, of course, once we've taken most of that waste away, but for the moment, it can stay there. Smaller tool rest, and we'll go back with our small bowl gouge. Lathe speed to 0, turn the lathe on. Small bowl gouge. That can come away. Check security. We're still all good there. I'm going to go with a spindle gouge this time. The spindle gouge is going to act more like a skew chisel than the bowl gouge. So I'll get that nice shearing action. To show you what I mean, we drop the tool rest down a little bit. I can turn the spindle gouge right on its side, you see. I only want to take a small amount away at a time. I know I'm dealing with a very thin edge. But the fineness of cut we get, it's less of a raking action than the bowl gouge, so you get a really fine finish. And you could argue that, well, why don't we do that for that whole dome section? You could do. Just a bowl gouge just tends to remove a little bit more timber a bit quicker. So that's the reason. Work them in combination rather than use solely one tool sort of thing. And then, of course, sand the rest of that up, and that's that body done. We are going to sand a couple of flats on that in a moment. I want to show you how the arms and the head actually attach, which is quite an important part of the build. But there's your body. There's your body. Let's put it together so far. So I'll come to camera a minute. So base can come over. That will sit in there. And so that's our build to this point. Okay, we're getting there. We're starting to see a figure come to life now. So we need arms. Arms and a head. Quite important for any figure. So we'll go straight to our arms. Again, we've pre-drilled the arms. I've pre-drilled them in one side only. Okay, The reason that we've done that is the top of the arm doesn't need a hole. There's nothing that's actually going into it, but the bottom, we've got the forearm and the hand to go into this once we've turned it. So we'll do that. I'll only do one of these for you. There's no need just to do them both. Well, in fact, I suppose we've got the time. We could do them both. Nice simple shape. We're going to make them, and if you're making a Viking figure, perfect, because they'll have like a tunic on, and it's like almost like a smock. So if you're going to do a wood turner, you can do them in the same way, where the top of the sleeve comes down to your elbow. Then the forearm and hand is separate. Okay, so that's the bit we're turning now, is this section right here. So that can come off. Now we're going to use two centers. I want a single pointed center in the tailstock, and I want a friction drive in the other. Slightly different friction drive, this one. This is a ring center again, but it's a drive center, not a tailstock. It's a solid center. So that goes in the headstock, and in the tailstock we use our single pointed center. Now the reason for that is this is going to be centered into the hole that's drilled on that blank piece of timber. There we are. So single pointed center into the tailstock. Okay, so it centers around that hole, and then I've already centered up, you'll see the center point there, ready to take the friction drive. Going to do this in two parts. Again, there's waste to be removed at the end of this process. Piece of sycamore. This is what we're using here. I can get rid of the gouges. I'm going to go solely with the skew on this one. And we'll go with the big skew as well. Make sure nothing's touching the tool rest. Turn the lathe on. Again, we're going to go quite quick. We want to go fast with our lathe speed. About 2,000 revs, I reckon. We'll rough down first. Every time it stops, because it's friction, you'll need to just tighten up a little bit. So down to a cylinder. Once you're down to a cylinder, then you can start the shape. So I've done two things there. First of all, we got the shape going, but then I've also tidied up what will be the underside by creating a slicing action there. And that's going to minimize any tear or breakout. Let's just take them around a little bit more. And then, of course, like everything else, you would sand and seal if you want to. There we are. So we've got one arm. I'm going to not break that off, because if I break it off, what I'm potentially do is actually tear out some of the grain into the arm itself. We'll do one more of those, nice and quick, full speed. As much as anything else, this German tradition smokers, massive influence, like I said, but also the tools we're using. So we're using that German influence style of skew, and I find it quite important to use the tools that would have always been used to make these. It's, if nothing else, it's great practice in skew chisels and tool handling. spindle gouges, all those sorts of things. So it's a good chance, because it's only on small pieces, to get your practice in as well. And I know the skew chisel causes a lot of frustration and fear in many people, but this is the perfect thing to practice on, especially things like this where we're roughing down. Check for round. Once you've got to that round position, then you can start shaping. Tidy up that underside. And then just take out some of this waste. You want to leave as small amount of waste clearance as possible. Hey, if it comes off, it comes off. It doesn't matter. A tiny little bit left on there. There we are. So that's the position. Again, thinking batch turning, which I generally do because that was my sort of training. Do them all to that stage before you move on and change things to the next stage. But that's it. That's ready to be. Would normally be sanded before we take this off, but ready, all that bit's come off, ready to be just cleaned up on the tips now. And that's what we're going to do next. So let's just pop that to one side. Now, this is quite an interesting little technique, this one. This is using, again, friction. And I'm going to use a set of jaws which don't get used that much. They tend to be looked at more for engineers than anything. They're little step jaws. But basically, any jaw that goes down to pretty much zero in its closure will work on this. So in this case, like I say, if there's any engineers there, you'll probably recognize them more for engineering than woodworking. But what they're going to do for me is hold my paint sticks. Paint sticks are again pieces of dowel. Let me just grab a handful and show you. This is the reason I call them paint sticks is because I use them for holding pieces when I'm painting. Okay, as you can see from the colours there, I use them for holding pieces when I'm painting. Save me getting paint all over my fingers. Okay, 6mm dowel, and not fluted dowel either. This is solid dowel, so this creates a really good hold certainly for things like this. And so what I'm going to do is that's going to go in just to have about that much exposed, and then our finished pieces can slot on a little bit further back, and that frees me up to turn. Now there's not a lot of power there, not a lot of pressure, so you do need to be a little bit wary when you're turning, but hold just enough pressure for you to finish the piece, then sand. Okay, so it's a nice way of working. That one can come off. Next one can go on. A little bit further back. Let me just cut the waste off first. Like I say, it's always best to cut that off as opposed to try and twist it off, because generally if you twist it off, it will pull the grain out of the piece you're working on. There we are. And again, once you got to that stage, it's time to start sanding. So like I say, a lovely way of finishing the ends of those. So we're almost time to start sanding. I want to do one more thing before we sand these and get them in position. But there's our arms so far. So we'll get the head. Let me pick him up. We'll get the head going in a second, and then we'll show you how to attach all these pieces. Head's another simple piece, and again, we're going to do it in a very similar way to what we've just done. Remember what I said earlier, though. The head's actually a piece of maple. It's a harder material altogether, harder than the sycamore we've just been turning. I can feel it. The weight of it is much denser because this is, and you want something pretty. What I mean by that is this is going to be exposed. The timber is going to be left. It's not going to be coloured in any way whatsoever. Like I say, maybe just a couple of little dabs of red just to show sort of rosy cheeks, but that's about it. So between centres in the same way. We'll go back to our chuck in a minute. And we're using that friction drive. Single point in center in the tailstock. Now, I used to do these head shapes as balls, just a solid round. Now, you can do that. You can make your Viking, your wood turner, your carpenter, a fat face, a rosy fat face, if you want to. Most of mine now tend to be these more slender faces. There we are. Make sure nothing's touching the tool rest. Turn the lathe on. And we'll go straight back in with the skew. Now, the only reason I've got the hole in this one is to hold the piece to clean up what will be the chin. There we are. So we can round over the top. And you can leave a little bit of a flat on the top. That doesn't matter because that's actually going to be covered up with a hat. There we are. Taking out some of the waste on the chin. I'm going to go to a spindle gouge in a minute. The spindle gouge. We want to bring this right the way over. There we are. Let's we'll go back to the skew just to take some of this waste away here. There we are, that'll do. And then again, you're going to sand that, make him nice and clean. I would sand all the way back up to 400, maybe 600 grit, depending on if there was any scratches left. But that's going to be our head. We'll finish them off in the same way. The hole that you've got here doesn't matter. This is going to be used to hold the piece in the same way we've just done the arms. But that's going to be covered up with a hat. Now, you could use a piece of dowel to hold the hat on if you wanted to. We're going to make a horned hat, our Viking horned hat. In a second, but yeah, it's as simple as that. We'll just cut that bit of waste away, use our chuck again with those internal jaws, and that one on. Get our paint stick. There we are, nice and secure. Just take out that waste. There's no point struggling with too much waste material. So if I just simply cut that waste away, you've only got a very small area to clean up. And same thing, use something like a spindle gouge or a skew chisel. I found if you use a skew chisel on this, it tends to ride up the blade of the skew chisel. So a spindle gouge is a little bit better, just to make sure it stays where you want it to stay. Take your time with this one. If you're unsure about the fixing, then don't bother going to a tool at all. Just go straight to a coarse abrasive and shape it with that. You're in your own workshop, no one's going to know, so it'll be fine. There we are. And again, we're going to sand. It's important with these, unlike the arms, because generally the arms get painted anyway, but it's important with these that you sand to a good grit size. So like I've just said, 400 to 600 is good, because you'll see through this, you'll actually see the timber. But there we are. We have our head. So what we'll do next, before we move on to the actual hat, let's sand everything and get it ready to glue together. Obviously, we're not going to glue it together today because it's going to take too long for the glue to dry. But the glue I use is an epoxy resin, and it's a 5-minute setting epoxy resin. 5-minute setting, but you still got to sort of support it whilst it is drying. But I found the epoxy resin really, really quick to dry, really hard once it is dry. And certainly for these sorts of things, you can only, when you're butt jointing things together, probably the best one to go for. Most PVAs, most wood glues tend to dry over a course of several hours, especially on a butt joint. So that's why epoxy resin is so good for gluing. So I'm going to sand for you now. So we're going to change this chuck out. And when I say sand, we're going to create some flats for everything to be butt jointed together. So we're going to go with our C-jaws again. And the sanding. There's a little bit of freehand sanding going to happen here, where you're just judging everything, really. You're judging where to put the flats. You're judging where to put the arms. So you might want, for instance, to have your figure in action, so with his arm raised, that sort of thing. Then that's all generally in the gluing, but you will need to judge your angles when you do that. So we're going to put the sanding disc on here. There we are. Dust extraction is going to be massively important on this section because we are going to generate a huge amount of dust in this point. Now, the disc I've got on here at the moment is an 80 grit. For finishing, I would definitely go up, maybe a 120 or 150. Again, your scratches will be seen if you're using a transparent color. I like to use the chestnut spirit stains because with those, you can see through them. So if you look at the Vikings, for instance, you can see the grain through the color. And that's really quite important. We're wood turners at the end of the day. I don't want to cover anything up. So you can see the grain, especially that front yellow one there. You've got the grain coming through. Again, they're all sycamore. Now, if you look at the legs, again, they're colored, adding little bits of embellishment like the leather. And on the shields, we've used some gilding pastes. And leather around the hat, some chains, some fur for the capes, that sort of thing. It all adds to the figures. And it depends on the figure you're making, of course, to the sort of embellishments you want to put on. But these are really nice little characters. Question, or are we good? We got a question. Let's do a question before we sand.
Yeah, question from Frederick. Can you tell a little bit about the chucks and the jaws that you're using, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're all available from Dorch and Danola. These are the SK114 chucks. I will be, sorry, using the SK100 as well. Okay, but for the majority of what I've been doing, I've been using the SK114. Now, we make them here in Axminster, and all the jaws that I'm using will just transfer from one chuck to another. So if you have one chuck, you can use all the jaws I'm using, just take the one set out and put the next set in. We do a huge selection of jaws, and you don't need to get them all. This is the main thing, and something that I was sort of alluding to at the beginning of this demonstration. If you only have 2 or 3 sets of jaws, that's fine. You make the pieces suit your jaw. You don't have to go and get every jaw to suit a particular size. But yeah, there are their own jaws, and all the fitments I'm using fit them, like the faceplate ring for the sanding disc. It all works in conjunction with each other. All right. Okay, so a little bit of sanding. Dust extractor's got to go on here. They speed back down to 0. And I need to create several points now. On here, we need a flat for the head. We need a flat for the arms. And then I need also to create those same flats on the arms and on the head. So let's start off. I'll remove our center. And I want an equal flat on this side. So I'm looking above. I can see where I'm sanding. Take it away, just judge, make sure you're even. There we are. So I've got the 2 flats on there. Now I want to have a flat where the head is going to rest. So dead in the middle of the arms. This flat here will eventually have a hole drilled through it. I always go 8mm for the hole here. And that will line up with the hole that's going to be drilled in the head as well. We're going to look at how we do that hole in the head in a moment. But that's it. That's our 3 holes. Okay, so we've got our arms and the head. So now we'll do the same with the arms and the head. So that's the effect we're trying to achieve with the arms. Like I say, a butt glue joint on there is absolutely fine with the epoxy resin. And once you've done that, I would do that before you glue the head on, because you do that, let that glue dry, and then you can put your color on before you put the head on. The head needs to be done after color. So the top of the head, in this case, is the bit with the hole in it. Okay, so what I want to do is make sure my flat is near the bottom where the chin will be. And then again, that'll line up nicely. Once we've got it all joined together, of course, it'll be like that. So a very simple process, really. There's nothing too intricate with the joins. You can have them wherever you want. You can have it higher if you want to, have it a little bit further down. Entirely up to you. It depends on the figure you're making. So there, we're getting there now. So you think about everything we've done so far. We've got right from the base, the feet, the arms. We're all actually building a figure, if I can get this in shot as much as possible. Now, I haven't got enough arms to be able to do this for you with the head as well, but this is where we are. That and our head. So we're almost there. I want to make a hat. I want to do that Viking horn hat because it's iconic, really. This one's going to sit over, and I don't tend to put the eyes on, which is really the soul of the figure. I don't put the eyes on until the hat's on because I want those eyes just peeking from underneath the hat. So I want it in the right position, and very, very simple to do the eyes. Most of them get put on with a permanent marker. So we'll do a base layer of the black with a permanent marker just as a dot, and then pick out, once that's dry, pick out with a white acrylic just a little dot, and then again once that's dry, one tiny little dot of black again, and that's the eye done. If you're doing an angry Viking, then a little bit of frowning eyebrow works as well. So you can really play around with the features on these to get them working just right. Before we do the hat, let me just show you one thing. So to drill these are really fiddly bits to drill, but I can't drill them before they actually turned. So I've made up a little jig here. This is just a V block on an angle. You can see the angle there. That sits on my pillar drill. Then the head goes in. You've got a little stop here, and then I can drill through. What I tend to do is set this up on the pillar drill so I can do several at a time. So it's in the right position. I just drop the head in, bring the pillar drill down, drill the hole, next one, and keep going like that. But it gives me the right angle for the hole to come through, which will then eventually match up with the hole which I drill on the body. And all I do when I'm gluing these together, I just eyeball down the hole that I've drilled in the head to match up with a hole in the body. Okay, got to have that flow through. Incidentally, the holes in the base here, let me just show you this. We're going to drill another 2 8mm holes in that position. And the reason we do those, that's a flue. We need the air flow to create the smoke movement as well. If you didn't have anything here, the cone would go out straight away. So 2 8mm holes in this piece to keep that flow going. Okay, do that before you turn, I would recommend, otherwise you get breakout. Okay, so we're going to do the hat next. So let's move things around just a little bit. So the hat, we're going to start between centers, and this is our blanks. I'm not going to worry about centering up dead exactly, but I'm just going to eyeball center. And again, it depends on the character you're making to the hat style shape that you give it. So those are going to be the horns. So we'll rough them both down. So let's go with small pro drive. Single point center in the tailstock end is absolutely fine. All I want to do is rough down to a cylinder and create a hole point for the chuck, because I need to access one end. I can't turn these between centers. This doesn't work. Lathe speed 0, turn the lathe on. I've checked to make sure nothing's touching the tool rest. We can go straight in with a roughing gouge. So I'm going to use the O'Donnell jaws for this one. So the ODs, if I set up my calipers again, and we'll go straight to that beading and parting tool. tidy up that first area. And then with your skew, create your dovetail. Go. We'll do the same on the other piece. The other piece that we're going to eventually make the horns out of. Just rough it down to begin with. Size for the tenon or the dovetail. Skew chisel just to create a dovetail. Tidy up the first part of the face. Yeah. Now that's all your blanks ready. So now for this, you could do several horns, for instance. We can do several hats because we just created the whole point. So we're going to remove that one, go back to our O'Donnell jaws. Get rid of the calipers. Don't need them anymore. So we'll do the hat first, and then we'll do the horns to suit. Or do a horn to show you. We might need to move the tailstock. We'll see how we go. So tool rest is clear. Lathe speed to 0. Turn the lathe on. And let's go with our small 1/4" bowl gouge. We'll rough down to a nice cylinder first. Okay. Next, I just want to face off. I am going to move that tailstock out of the way. And I'm going to bring over another chuck. So we're going to bring that chuck into play. Because this is the smallest set of jaws I have, I want to make sure that we've got a recess to suit. I also want to make sure that the hole that I make actually fits over our head here. Now this is the one that we've just turned, but this is a head that I've already made earlier. So you can see the hole, okay, and that hole is angled to come out through where the flat is, okay. You may also notice a little bradawl hole there as well. Now that's for a tiny 3mm hole that I drill to fix a nose into. A nose is really important. These extreme features are really important for all of these figures. So let's start taking some of that center out. My mistake. Tidy that up again. Do that again. So we need to go deep enough for the head. There we are. If you're getting that, you see that catch that I just had, especially on the outside of a bowl, it's quite important when you start your cut to pause. Get the shoulder of the gouge to bite, and then when you've got that shoulder, you can push against it. There we are. Let's see how our head fits in that. I think it's not too bad. I think we'll go a little bit deeper, get it over the head a little bit more than that, but I think we're almost there. There we are. We'll try the head one more time. And that sits in there nicely now. That's going to cover that the top of the head well. Good. Right, I just want to check one thing. I want to make sure that I can fit the hat over my jaws. And we are good. So now I want to create another little flat. That's going to be for the chuck in a moment. I need to be able to hold this piece. So just the tiniest of little flats. Now we can start shaping the outside of the hat. Bowl gouge or spindle gouge, whichever you're happier with. Take out the waste. Loads of thickness in there. So what I'll do now, we'll go to spindle gouge. Just because it's a little bit easier to get into that area. Let's create a little band almost there, look. Again, we'll just have another check, see how that looks on our Viking. Pretty good. A little bit of sanding probably needed. So you would sand that, and then once you've sanded it, you're going to cut it off. We're going to swap the jaws. And we're going to expand into that recess that we've made. Carefully, again, remember, you're not actually holding on much timber. So it'd be quite easy to split it if you expand too much. Or the other thing, I mean, you could quite easily do a little jam chuck, a little friction chuck on this. So a tapered bit of timber that you can just tap the piece onto just to do this next relatively light section. There we are. Of course, you're going to sand up next. So sand that before you do anything else. But that's the hat. Well, all we need to do now is make some horns to go on that hat. Now, they're going to be turned as well. Turned and then sanded up. So once again, we're going to swap our chuck. Back to our O'Donnells. And I think we use the same bit of timber that we've just made the hat from. me. Because all we need to do here is a ring. Almost like if you're going to make a captive ring, that sort of stuff. So do your outside shape first. If you have captive ring tools, then brilliant. You can do that on this section. So it's about the right size. And I'm going to start with a parting tool and the beading and parting tool. So we'll create some space first. Just keep that curve flowing. We're nearly there. So we have your ring. So now what we need to do is just cut that up and we're going to create the horns. We're going to sand the horns in. And again, we go straight back to our sanding disc. And I'm not going to use the sanding table for this. You don't need to. So if we just remove our chuck again, we'll swap that over for the C jaws in the 114. There we are. I'm just going to cut that in half. Just a piece of waste wood. There we are. Now, you can see the grain on this particular piece is running this way. So I'm going to immediately go to the weak spot, cut him in half. It doesn't take much. There we are. I'll put one piece to one side. And then we're going to do the same on this piece. So we have our two partial horns that look nothing like horns at the moment. They will in a minute. They will in a minute. Bit of dust extraction on because we're going to create a little bit of dust here. Lay speed to 0 on the sander though. A little bit of extraction. I've got this running fairly slow as well because I'm going to hand sand. I want to be able to use the edges. Little flat on the hat. Now you would do a lot more sanding to this bit, but essentially we can go to that close up there, if I can get my fingers out of the way, with a little flat there, a bit more of your epoxy resin, and then once you've got the other one made, you've got your nice Viking helmet. There we are. So we've made it. We've gone from, well, we've just about done every single component there. Would you pass me that the finished piece? Let's just have a look at the finished piece, because what we would do after you've done all the making, of course, is the decorating. One of my favorite bits of the whole process. The decorating is down to, for me, it's down to airbrushing. I do use aerosols. If you want to go completely opaque, so non-transparent, then aerosols work really well. And there's some great aerosols out there, especially the ones designed for graffiti art, because the pigment in those is really quite strong. So there's a range out there I like to use called Cobra. They're specifically designed for that type of artist, but they're a great one. They're a heavy pigment. But there we are. There's our finished smoker. We've made all the pieces. We've made the pieces from the ground up. We started with the base. We've then made the feet, the legs, the holder. Now these are the holes that I was telling you about. These are the flue holes, so these let the air through and give you some flow. These are just it's important to have a barrier between the heat from the incense cone. Even though that incense cone is only glowing and not on fire as such, not a flame, you've got to have a barrier between that and the timber. And then from there onwards, the top, if you remember, we hollowed the bottom out. I want to show you the hole. There we are. You've got the hole on the underside where that smoke comes through, matching up nicely with the head, and then your incense can come out that head nicely. I want to show you also the face on this one. I was talking to you about the face and the features. Maybe this other camera there, Craig. There, that shows them nicely. So what we start off with the eyes. Black dot first, the biggest dot. Then you go with a little acrylic, slightly smaller dot, and then finally a black dot in the very bottom there. So a very simple face to create. You can see the blushing cheeks here. So a very light spray with an airbrush to create that little rosy cheek. And if he's an angry Viking, then the frowning eyebrows works really well. A little bit of fake fur from the internet with some chain. Go to your jewelry shops or your jewelry making stores to do that, to create those. And then all of the Viking swords and shields, those sorts of things, I use just a little magnet on the back and on the hand of those to keep them in place so it doesn't drop the sword. So there, that's our little Viking smoker complete. I hope you've enjoyed that as much as I enjoy making these little figures. And again, hopefully I'll be able to see you again sometime with a future demonstration. So Craig, before we go, do we have any more questions? Guys, have a fantastic adventure making your smokers. My name is Colin Way. It's been a pleasure working for Dorch and Danola today. See the guys in store. If there's any of those jaws or centers that we've used that you'd like, they're going to help you absolutely. So thank you very, very much for watching. Bye-bye.